I do not think there are too many filmmakers with that depth of knowledge to actually make an entire series on the making of the Indian Constitution. When one evening Shyam Benegal was sitting and watching TV, he saw a news anchor and he cast the news anchor in a film called Charandas Chor, and that is Smita
Oh,
Patil's first film. What you
okay.
can do is promote it and make sure more and more people get to watch it. And I hope with platforms like Rekobi, with conversations like these, and I think if we just put together all that stuff that has been recommended from this conversation, I think we've done our job.
আলাদা প্রদেশ হতে হবে পশ্চিম পাকিস্তান আর পূর্ব বাংলা
Where does it say reserved for Europeans only? Please show me.
Get off my train
देखो तारे बाट दिन ना बीते ना ही रात कोने कहूँ दिल की बात मैं तो थाकी रे.
Welcome to Cubicle Cinema by Rekobi. My name is Dipankar and I'm thrilled to be your host for today's episode. I'm stepping in for our regular host Malika, who is taking a little bit of well-deserved break, and I promise to do my best to keep up with the incredible energy she brings to the show. Today we have a very special guest joining us, and he's a legend in his own right, one of the most celebrated voices in Bollywood criticism, and someone who truly understands the pulse of Indian cinema. Mr. Mayank Shekhar, welcome to Cubicle Cinema. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Deepankar, and I think you're doing a fairly good job.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous as well, but I'll do my best to do justice, right? So I'll talk about what we are doing today for this podcast. So in this episode, we're embarking on a fascinating journey to introduce the new generation to the brilliance of Shyam Benegal. He's one of the India's cinema's greatest visionaries, right? What we had till date, and from his nuanced storytelling to his profound impact on Indian cinema, we'll explore why his work remains relevant and timeless even in today's fast-changing world. Now let's gear up to explore the magic and mastery of Shyam Benegal cinema with our host Mayank. Shall we start, Mayank?
Yes, absolutely. You're the host. I'm the guest. Carry
Okay,
on.
sure, cool. So I just have a list of questions which I have. So we'll talk about the first one, which is basically talking about bridging generations, right? So Shyam Benegal's films define an era of socially conscious cinema, right? For a generation raised on streaming platforms and commercial blockbusters. How do you think his storytelling resonates today? Can we still find traces of his impact in contemporary Indian cinema?
Well, I think if you're going to talk about Shyam Benegal and his impact over generations, I don't think there has been any decade or perhaps even more than a couple of years when Shyam Benegal's work has not been accessed by some generation or the other. His last film, that was in 2024 or was it 2023? And he was
Yeah.
89 years old then.
Mhm.
He started his career purely because he was an ad executive and an ad man at the time. But if you see his first short film, that was made in 1962.
Yes.
That's when Jawaharlal Nehru was still the Prime Minister of India. That's when we were at least 7 years before man entered moon. At least 20 years before we got color television, and this man had
Yes.
already made his debut. And of course, his first feature was Ankur, that was in 1974, when he was already 40 years old. So if you purely look in terms of how he's had a body of work across generations, across decades, Shyam Benegal never really left us.
Mm.
Now that there is a younger audience that needs to access the work over time, I think a conversation like this becomes essential because we can do a lot of recommendations for people at Rekobi, but really he's been an intergenerational, absolutely timeless filmmaker, with not just with the relevance of his works, but also the sheer output. I mean, you look at this man from short films to documentary films to documentary series to television series to television movie to feature films. His body of work is expansive across genres, across medium in a certain sense. It's unheard of in that sense. When the body of work is so huge, I think it makes sense to have at least a little bit of conversation. So at least we can point the viewer towards at least 10 or 15 things that they can certainly watch of Shyam Benegal. It doesn't matter how old they are.
Okay, got it. So we'll move to the next question which you have with us, right? So it's mostly in terms of, there are so many platforms nowadays, and how we'll talk about visual storytelling in the digital age, right? So Benegal was a master of visual realism, right? Weaving powerful narratives through authentic settings and characters. Now, in today's world of CGI heavy productions and fast paced editing, how would you introduce his cinematic style to an audience accustomed to spectacle over subtlety?
No, absolutely. I think if you follow Shyam Benegal's works, and of course they were mostly what you would consider within the low to the medium budget films, you can tell when the story is exceedingly strong, then the CGI doesn't matter. And if you would say, where does one usually use CGI the most? They use it in period films, for instance, and not just CGI. You also use there's a lot of expense involved when it comes to
Mm.
recreating a particular period. And you see Bharat Ek Khoj, which is Discovery of India,
Yes,
Nehru's
yes,
Discovery of India
yes,
made into a TV series, and it's
yes.
just pure storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a Bahubali to enjoy. In this case, of course, history. Bahubali is myth, but you do not need the spectacle if the story is strong, and you see that across Shyam Benegal's works, and that's one of the reasons why he was loved by people as the Hindi new wave or the Indian parallel cinema movement. And when I say parallel, what it means is that it does not intersect with the mainstream. And mainstream is where all the commerce is. Mainstream is where all the audiences, the massive audiences are. His films were commercial as well. I mean, they were
Yes.
all, most of them are privately funded. A lot of them, Blaze Productions was the company that regularly funded his films, and they made their money back. I think
Mm-hmm.
the most beautiful example of commerce and filmmaking would be a film like Manthan, which
Yes.
was India's first
Mm-hmm.
crowd-funded film. So
Yes.
500,000 farmers, they put in money for the making of Manthan. That also
Oh.
meant that all 500,000 of them, they would go and watch the film, and the movie also became a commercial success. And this was
Oh.
the story of the cooperative movement in India, and it was a story of the Operation Flood of the Amul founder Varghese Korean, and Varghese Korean was played by Girish Karnad. And while you may think, oh my God, this is history at some level, and you know what, it's going to be art house, and there's some perception in some people's mind that art house means boring. But the fact is, it's also a really funny film. I distinctly remember the first scene of Manthan, and where Varghese Korean, that is Girish Karnad, who's playing the part.
Mm-hmm.
The villagers come to receive him in the station, and they're late because they say that galti se aaj train time par aa gayi. There was a little bit of wit, there was a bit of humor, there was obviously a lot of depth in the storytelling, and when you have all those aspects, then you know what, CGI doesn't matter.
Okay, great. I actually wasn't, I didn't know about that crowdfunding thing, but that's actually a good thing. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. But thanks for that info.
No, I think if you look at Shyam Benegal's works, there are a series of firsts, right? For
Uh-huh.
instance, I mentioned Ankur. Now,
Yes.
Ankur is the first film of Shabana Azmi.
Yeah.
Then
Okay.
thereafter he did Nishan the following year,
Mm-hmm.
1975. That is the
Mm-hmm.
first film of Nasuruddin Shah. Then
Mm-hmm.
when one evening Shyam Benegal was sitting and watching TV, he saw a news anchor, and he cast the news anchor in a film called Charandas Chor, and that is Smita
Oh.
Patil's first film. So it's
Oh.
his life has been a series of firsts, and first crowdfunded film is just one of them. It's also done a lot of first films of a lot of great actors, who are considered great forever.
Okay. Okay. I think he's done something like the Kickstarter thing of Kickstarter is basically for any ideas going to places. I think he did it start way before Kickstarter started actually. That was great learning about those. Right. So I'll just move on to our next question. Right. So it's basically lessons for all the aspiring filmmakers out there. Right. So for young aspiring filmmakers who may not have grown up with Benegal's work, right, what key lessons about storytelling, authenticity, or craftsmanship can they learn from his approach to cinema?
I think one of the, we've discussed this briefly earlier in any case, was that he was a man. Firstly, he would just work and work and work. He never
Hmm.
stopped, right, until
Hmm.
he was 89 years old. And that is, I
Hmm.
think, that is extremely inspiring. He was a very young mind. I have discussed movies with him, and he would talk about like he gave me one amazing lesson, right? I mean, this man he was 85 when I met him then, and it's about how watching a film, the closest that you can get to a theatrical experience is actually a cell phone, because he
Mm-hmm.
felt that the diagonal of the screen, your eyes should be at the distance of 1.5 times the diagonal of the screen, and the sound doesn't
Mm-hmm.
get better than a headphone anyway. So here's a man, who's consuming movies on his cell phone. At least he thought cell phones is a great way to watch movies. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
you look at how he also remained relevant throughout, right? I mean, you're
Okay.
looking at say around 2008, 2009, when there was a
Mm-hmm.
slight, there's a slight opening window in the multiplex space where you could make medium budget movies, right?
Okay.
Which were
Mm-hmm.
entertainers, but they're also socially conscious cinema, but realistic at the same time. What became OTT thereafter, and he made this phenomenal funny films called Welcome to Sajjanpur. He made another film called Well Done Abbaji. But I
Yes.
think in
Yes.
terms of young filmmakers, I think what they should do if they wish to understand Benegal, they should understand Satyajit Ray. And there is an
Okay.
amazing documentary that Shyam Benegal has done
Okay.
of Satyajit Ray, which is
Mm-hmm.
essentially Benegal having a conversation with Ray. I think the
Mm-hmm.
gems you get there about filmmaking also tells you how curious a mind Benegal was, and that was a documentary shot by Govind Nihalani, one of the top filmmakers as well. Govind Nihalani has also worked, as Benegal's cinematographer for many years. So
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that he left behind for young people forever is in terms of them as being inspiring filmmakers is his documentary of Satyajit Ray, and I think that should be watched. It keeps coming and going on YouTube, so you can just check if it's still there on YouTube, and if not, it'll come back. But I'm sure there are enough people on who are on Recobi. I'm pretty sure they know how to find anything online, and they should be able to find that good documentary on Satyajit Ray.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Even Sajid Ray is a legend by himself, also. Yeah. Cool. So moving on to our next question, which we have now, we'll talk a little bit about the OTT platforms and Sham Benegal in general, right? So now OTT platforms in general, they have given filmmakers unprecedented creative freedom, right? Let's say if Sham Benegal were making movies right now, okay, what kind of stories do you think he would have told, or how might have he leveraged those platforms to connect with the global audience?
Well, as I was saying, Dipankar, the question is not if Shyam Benegal was making movies now. He
Okay.
was actually making movies right until, a year before he passed away, which
Okay.
was his last release was when he was 89 years old. And what kind
Mm-hmm.
of film were he making? Very, very strong political films. And Mujib is the most important film for Bangladesh cinema, because it is the
Okay.
story of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the founder of the country, because Sheikh Hasina's father. Sheikh Hasina, in fact, came directly to him as the prime minister. She came directly to Benegal. That's what he told
Mm-hmm.
him, and asked him
Mm-hmm.
to make a film. And in his mid 80s, he pulled off a really heavy,
Okay.
large scale biopic of a man who was possibly the most important personality in contemporary history of Bangladesh. So the question is
Okay.
not whether he would be making. And plus he made a lot of things that I think make even more sense in the OTT world, right? So, for instance,
Yes.
I gave
Yes.
you an example of Bharate Code. Now, what is
Yes.
Bharate
Yes.
Code? It is actually genuinely an OTT series, which is a slow burn.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was watching Durdashan when it came out, but it's way ahead of its time because it's telling you something, and it is world class in terms of what it's trying to tell you, and it
Mm-hmm.
tells you over. It takes its own time, but the story, that's precisely what web series are. That was not how television series have usually been in India, right? So it was very ahead of its time in that sense.
Yes.
I think another example that you can take is of a film like Junoon. Now, Junoon in 1979 is a film, when it was produced by Shashi Kapoor, and it was a very high budget film for what you would call an art house movie. And that's precisely what OTT platforms tend to do. They take very strong stories and they put in money and they give it the legs that those need. And then they don't need to be in cinema for it, but they're all of us enjoying a little more meaningful content when it comes to OTT platforms anyway. So I think Junoon would be a very good example. In 1979, what he was doing is what people are now doing in 2025. So to answer your question, what would he be making now? Well, we know what he would be making. He was making films almost right up till the end of last year.
So yeah, for before we move to our next set of questions, right? So I would like to do a quick shout out to one of the recent episodes which we did with Mayank, right? That was basically on 25 years of 1999, where we had great movies coming up, like Fight Club and The Matrix and all. So it was a very nostalgic trip, through one of the iconic years, in movies in general, right? So for the folks out there who is watching to or tuning into this podcast episode, I would actually want you to go and check that link out, check that episode out. Yeah, over to our next question, man. So personal insights, right? So I think as a person, right, you would have spent a lot of time, a lot of years analyzing Indian cinema and its evolution. So, what's a lesser known Shyam Benegal film or a moment from his work that you believe deserves more attention from today's audiences, and why?
Well, the thing is, when we say lesser known or when we use words like underrated, it's usually
Mhm.
misunderstood. It is not to do with critical acclaim. When we say
Okay.
underrating, we usually mean underrating of the masters. And that often happens with films that are not in the hardcore commercial space.
Yes.
While
Yes.
Senegal's films were commercial, but these were not the blockbusters. While a lot of them did make money, otherwise, you would not be such a successful filmmaker over such a long period of time. But these were not your blockbusters, right? So in that sense, most of Benegal's work, with barring a few exceptions, they need to be viewed by newer audiences because newer audiences need to be, we need to get acquainted to Benegal cinema, and it happens from generation to generation. So in that sense, when I say lesser known, what I mean is really my top film, Benegal movies, and anybody will have their own
Mhm.
top five or top 10, depending on who they are, depending on what they've loved, and also given
Mhm.
the fact that Benegal really had a massive output. So personally speaking, I think my number one Sham Benegal movie would be Kalyug. I think it's a
Mhm.
fantastic
Yes.
drama that is actually the retelling of Mahabharat story
Yes.
told
Yes.
through the lives of two corporate firms in Bombay. What is
Yes.
called the Bombay Club. It
Mhm.
looks at corporate corporate world through the lens
Mhm.
of mythology, through the lens of some fantastic storytelling. That is
Yes.
my number one. Of course, it changes from person to person. My number two is likely to be Mammo. Mammo was actually part of a larger trilogy that Sham Benegal did along with
Okay.
writer and film critic Khalid Mohammed. So there was
Uh,
Subeda that he did with him. There was
mhm.
also
Yes. Yes.
uh, Sadari Begum that he did with him, and then Mammo
Yes.
was also a film, which was almost like a biographical sort of work. But beautiful storytelling, beautiful performances. There's Farida Jalal in it.
Mhm.
That distinctly remember, and she plays Mammo, and this is a grandmother, and it's a beautiful film. So that would be my number two, and of course, it will change from person to person. I mean, if you want to watch Bhumika, I don't think. I mean, a lot of people would believe that Bhumika is Smita Patel's greatest performance. And Smita Patel was one of the greatest actors we had. That tells you something already. I think there is also Mandi, which was a hugely loved film, and of course, I've also mentioned earlier. I mentioned Manthan. So there's quite a bit out there for Benegal, but I think because you put a gun against my head to give this answer to you, I think I'll go with Kalyug as my favorite Sham Benegal movie.
Okay. Great. I know of the new Kalyug movie which was there, but not of the Benegal's
No,
movie. I'm
completely
definitely.
unrelated and way, way,
Yes.
way better.
Yeah. So after that, you mentioned that I was thinking about, okay, that no, and then you mentioned, okay, this is a different movie altogether. But I'm definitely gonna do a watch on that movie which you just spoke about, Kalyu. So our next question, which is there, is there's so many things, topics on women in general, right? So let's say we talk about Sham Benegal's portrait of women, right? So his movies in general often feature very strong, complex female characters, right? Who have challenging societal norms, I would say, right? So for today's new age women, right, what lessons can they take from these characters in terms of empowerment, independence, and navigating societal expectations whichever are there? Now, how do you think Benegal's portrayal of women in general will hold any relevance in empowering modern women? Because these movies were a bit old, so I would just want to know your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that sort of frames Sam Benegal's work is the fact that they were extremely progressive. by nature. And anything that is progressive by nature, whether it comes to commentary on the society we live in, when it comes to the commentary on the state of women in that society, when it comes to feminism per se, which is essentially looking for equal opportunity between men and women. You know what? Anything that's progressive is going to be long lasting because the arc of justice actually tends towards fairness, and
Mm-hmm.
you can see that in the work, very socially conscious uh, work of Shyam Benegal, and there are multiple examples of that. And I think that's one of the things that you take away, but not in a way that was pedantic, not in a way that was screechy, not in a way that was preachy, in a way that was subtle, in a way that was realistic, in a way that you thought about it, but you thought about it because you wanted to think about it, not that it was being spoon fed to you. And that was the beauty of Sam Benegal cinema. He made you think, but he made you think in a way that was entertaining first. I think that one of the things that he used to say was that the primary purpose of films is entertainment, but it
Yes.
is not the only purpose, right? And he was a great believer in that. So the reason why I constantly say this is, a lot of times we do disservice to art house cinema by making these, allegations against them of being, oh, feminist or this or that. These heavy words actually do damage to cinema viewing to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people because they stay away. No, these are not
Mm-hmm.
feminist films. These are just great films.
Yes.
Every film has its own politics. Was the politics of Benegal cinema feminist? Yes, but not in a way that was being drilled into your head. In a way that was
Mm-hmm.
entertaining, and I think that is what you need to discover as an audience instead of it being told to you that this is what it is. They was not like, okay, this is a film and here's the moral of the story. No, this is a film, you enjoy it and it stays with you, and there are certain values that you naturally imbibe because how can you not?
Yes. Got it. Cool. Fine. That was really interesting. Uh, so yeah, coming to our, we just have last two set of questions which we have. So Benegal is known for his impeccable casting choices, often elevating actors who were relatively unknown at that time, right? I think you spoke about some of the actors over here as well. So how crucial was his approach to casting in shaping the characters in his movies, and how do you think that approach currently contrasts with star-driven casting which we see in Bollywood movies today?
I think the essential aspect of Shyam Benegal that needs to be understood in terms of his contribution to cinema, more than just his films, he actually created an ecosystem around him. And that
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem came to be called the Hindi parallel cinema, or came to be called art house, if you like, or the new wave, if you like. And he literally initiated it. He literally went out of his way, seeking new talents and creating that world, and then creating his own star system also in that world. So Nasir, Shabana, Smita Patil, these
Mm-hmm.
three people were considered the top stars of Hindi parallel cinema movement, right? So if you
Okay.
had one of these three actors, and no matter who the director is, no matter what the budget is, it would have a certain legitimacy even as an Indian parallel cinema film. And who gave the world these three actors? It was Sham Benegal.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
Satyadev Dubey recommended Nasir to Shyam Benegal. Also told Satyadev was a big dramatist in Bombay who used to teach at Film and Television Institute of India, which is where Shabana Azmi studied from, which is also where Nasir Shah studied from. And Satyadev Dubey recommended Nasir Shah. Also told him that he's a madcap.
Mm-hmm.
He has problems taking instructions.
Mm-hmm.
He's a crazy guy. Then Benegal asked him if he's a crazy guy, why are you recommending me? He said, because you asked for a good actor. He's a good
Mm-hmm.
actor, right? I
Mm-hmm.
gave him that chance with Nishant, right? And he also, took that outside of just these three young people of the time, and you can see the way Om Puri became quite an important element of Sham Benegal's movie. You take a Susman, you take an Arohan, you take someone like a Anant Nag, who became such an important element of Sham Benegal's films. I think, as I said, my favorite Sham Benegal movie is Kalyug, and Anant Nag is right there. You take someone like Rajat Kapoor, who became such an important element of Sham
Yes.
Benegal's film with the Maker of Mahatma, for instance, or Suraj Ka Sata Ghora. So you could see some familiar faces in his films. Now, just name six of them, but there are far more also. And you could tell that there is a world being created, not just within cinema, in terms of the narrative of the story, but also outside the cinema in terms of these people becoming very saleable actors and saleable in their own right. So I think his greatest contribution outside of films is the ecosystem that he managed to create around himself of actors, and not just actors, writers, technicians, and it was a parallel cinema movement of its own.
Okay. I think on that lines, some of the OTTs are playing for similar actors. I feel as of now, I may be wrong, but
Absolutely.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
what a Pankaj Tripathi is to the OTT world,
yes,
what a Jaideep Alawat is to the
yes,
OTT world. What at some level you could even argue that Manoj Bajpayee has become to the OTT world. That's what
yes,
Naseer, Shabana, and Smita were to the Indian art house movement or the Hindi
yes,
new wave or the Khal cinema movement. And these were
yes,
very important actors because they were also very important films.
yes. Yeah. Cool. So as we come to the end of the podcast, I this is the last question which I have. Okay. So this is basically on the role of history in terms of the movies which were done by Mr. Benegal, right? So Benegal's historical movies like Bharat Ek Khoj, we spoke so much about it. I think even Zubeda, right? They offer deep insights about the India's past in general, right? So in a time when many prefer escapism over history, how do you think Benegal's historical narratives can help today's generation understand and appreciate their cultural roots? Because I think we are kind of losing that. That's what I feel personally as well. So I would want to know your thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. I think here was a man sitting right here in Bombay, well, mostly South Bombay. His office was in Tardeo. You're doing stuff completely on his own terms as a filmmaker when there was a completely different kind of movie industry, churning out completely different kinds of cinema from the mid
Hmm.
70s onwards. I mean, 75, 74, these are years of Sholay, and these are years of
Yeah.
Akbar Anthony. And here's a man who's
Yes.
sitting and telling you about social consciousness, about social
Yes.
realities of this world with an Ankur or a Nishant. So there is one aspect, that aspect of it is actually part of history on its own. If you're looking at history of our society, I do not think there are too many filmmakers with that depth of knowledge to actually make an entire series on the making of the Indian Constitution.
Hmm.
The series is called Samvidhan. If
Okay.
all of us swear by the Constitution, and that's what's going to save us, no matter which political party is in power, no matter who is our leader, then I think it's very important that we understand how that Constitution got to be written. Who said what? Why did it say this? And these are the founding persons of this country. I was going to say founding fathers, but there are women also. So it's not just fathers, there are also mothers or finding founder figures of Indian history. And he's done that phenomenally well for Rajya Sabha TV, which I think would be, I'm sure that it's on YouTube as well. It's a multi-part series that becomes then, to a huge extent, a social artifact, a historical artifact. How many people read here? And how many
Hmm.
people love history in their classrooms anyway? But here is a guy who made the making of the Indian Constitution a thoroughly entertaining series, right? And that's something that maybe OTTs would do now, but this man was doing it about at least a decade plus ago. So yeah, I think his role in the history of cinema is unparalleled, and I'm talking about parallel cinema, therefore, pardon the pun. But his role in also explaining to Indians their own history, whether with the Bharati Khoj and all the way down, until about a decade ago, with Samvidhan, which is on the making of this constitution, is fabulous. And I think we will. Here's a man who will be remembered forever because of what all he left behind.
Great. So before I end the call, this is like a personal question which I have for you. So do you think we should have a Bharat Ek Khoj, like a second version right now, or someone should make it?
But I think by itself it's an absolutely complete work on its own.
Yeah.
It does huge justice to the original literature, which adapted from, which is Jawaharlal's book, Discovery of India. I don't think you can better it. What you
Okay.
can do is promote it and make sure more and more people get to watch it. And I hope with platforms like Repobi, with conversations like these, and I think if we just put together all that stuff that has been recommended from this conversation, and someone just picks up Bharat Coach Although I'd like
Yeah.
them to start with Kalyu, that's going to take shorter time. But Bharatish goes for this expansive series. I think we would have done that job.
Cool. Great. So I think with that we come to the end of today's episode of Cubicle Cinema by Rekubi. I would like to thank you, Mayank, for giving out time and joining us today, and sharing all your valuable insights for this podcast, right, and talking so much about the cinematic brilliance of Shyam Benegal. So it's always a pleasure to have you, Mayank, on the podcast. Right?
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much
much,
for your time.
Pankaj, and you did a good job for the fact that you were hosting a podcast for the first time. Carry on with the good work.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mayank. So, as for the listeners who are there, thanks for tuning in. If you want to find out, insightful conversations like this, and you want to go get deep dive into movies and all, do sure subscribe to our channel, and our Instagram handle is also there, and you will find all the upcoming episodes over there and what we're gonna do over there as well. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mayank.